Alright, now we're going to shave this head, and I don't mean we're going to take a pair of clippers to it and buzz all the hair off of it, which if it had hair on it, you'd want it definitely shaved off anyway. Alright, what I have here is 120 grit sandpaper, and it's the cloth back. You could use any kind of sandpaper. If you want to take a lot off quick, you can go 80, but whenever you do your second polishing, if you go under 120 grit, let's say you do 60 for the initial, you want to double that to 120. I normally finish out with just 120, but if your head's warped or anything like that, you could do this to take the warp out of the heads. You want a flat surface. It doesn't have to be absolutely perfect, but you want it as close as you can. A block of wood, like a block of 2x6 that's flat, works really good, and you can throw a staple in each corner of your paper. But it doesn't have to be perfectly flat, because I run it across, quarter turn, run it across, like that. Alright, so I've got a few thousandths taken off of this head now. That'll give me a little bit more compression, plus I've got the surface of the gasket surface milled flat. If you're going to do any upgrades to these Predator engines, one of the first things that you need to do, in my opinion, is to throw the heavier valve springs on there. I'm running 18 pounds on this 212. So, yeah, that's one of the first things you want to do. Otherwise, the engine, when you increase the RPMs, the engine's going to spin so fast that the valves are not going to be able to shut quick enough before the piston comes back up, and that piston will smack that valve, and then you've ruined that engine. So definitely upgrade your springs so that you got more pressure closing those valves, and they'll close quick enough to avoid that valve float and avoid that valve smacking that piston. I went ahead and I'm going to post that previous video anyway, because I'm not going to tear this thing down and do everything all over again. But unfortunately, a lot of that footage sucked. I should have reviewed each clip before I went on to the next step. But anyway, you get the gist of it. I just wish it had turned out better. Whenever we rebuild the Briggs, excuse me, whenever we rebuild the Briggs, I'll make sure to get better videos of that. Anyway, we've milled our Hemi head down, and got the head gasket on there again. You can see I've got the slots in the right places. And we're going to go ahead and reinstall the head. You want to make sure that you've got these caps right here on your valve springs. Otherwise, you're going to tear your engine up if you don't have those on there when you reinstall all this. So let's put our bolts in. Alright, so whenever you put these head bolts in, you want to make sure you put them in a cross pattern. That way you seat the head down correctly. Alright, now that those are in, we can go ahead and get our torque wrench and put 17 pounds of torque on each one of those. And then we can start putting our rods back in and our rockers and set our valve lash and all that. Torque down. Now we're going to put a little light on the subject. Now if you look down in there, see that little round hole there and there? Those are what your rods set in. So you want to make sure you set the ends of your rods in those. Like that. Again, if you do any of these upgrades to it, a bunch of them are free, but you still want to go up to 18-pound valve springs. Otherwise, you'll have valve float and your valves are going to smack your piston and you just wasted all your time. So upgrade your springs. Redbeard has a great video on doing the valve springs. So, you know, check out his video on that. These in. You still got to put the C-clip on the outside of them. But anyway, the bolt goes up on the valve. And I loosen the bolts up so that they'll go together a lot easier. And these pins go from the inside to outside. When you go to put your outside clip on, it's a C-clip or a C-clip or whatever you want to call it. Let's find you one. Here you go. There's you one of the C-clips, and they snap on the outside of this rod. But when you put these on, stuff you a cloth or a piece of paper towel or something down in there. That way you don't drop it down inside your engine, then you're pulling your daggum head to try to get it back out. So make sure you stuff something down in here just in case you drop that. You're not going to drop it down in the engine and then you got to take it back apart. Stuffed in there like that, and I'll start at the edge and tuck it around and then tuck it in the middle and then go underneath and then tuck it up the side. That way I don't drop anything down in that and have to go hunting for it. Okay, I got my clips on there. There you go, now you can see. The clip on the outside and the inside, outside and inside. I always find it easier to take these outside clips off, and when you remove these clips on these Hemi heads, put you a rag in there, you're going to lose them down in there. And I just take set them on that groove, and then I take a Torx bit screwdriver, because I've got the grooves in the Torx bit, so they hold them better, and I just push down on there until they click. And I know they're seated in there right. Okay, now we're going to pull the spark plug so we can find true top dead center on this engine and set our valve lash. You set the valves on these small engines, look down in there and you see the pistons all the way up at the top. You could take a little wooden dowel rod, stick it in there, make sure that piston's at the top. And when you turn them over, you want to watch your exhaust valve. This is your intake, that's your exhaust valve, or your exhaust side, so that's your exhaust valve, that's your intake valve. And anyway, you slowly turn the engine over by hand and you'll see this exhaust valve bump just a little bit, but it's not going to go all the way down and back up like you'll see the intake valve. You'll see it bump open a little bit, and after that bump and it levels out, that first initial bump that you're going to see is a compression release. Don't set it after that. Wait till the second bump. And make sure that your piston's at top dead center. If you set that on the compression release instead of on the actual compression, whenever you go to start this engine, that thing is going to build up pressure, and when it does, it's going to yank that pull cord back, and it could actually yank it back so hard it snaps that pull rope and that pull handle goes flying. Or when you got a hold of it, you got a grip on it like that, and whenever you go pull that motor, that thing kicks back, it'll yank so hard it could actually pop tendons in your wrists. So make sure you don't set that on the compression release, you set it on the actual compression. Alright, and I'll show you what I'm talking about on that compression release. Make sure this is on camera. Okay. Now watch this rocker right here. Slowly pull it over. See that little bump? It didn't go down that far. That's compression release. Right in there, after the compression release, when that piston hits top dead center, is where you want to set it. So you want to set it right there. Watch it, I'll spin it again and I'll show you. So we got, there's the exhaust letting it out. There's the intake valve opening up, letting fuel and air mixture in. Now watch the exhaust valve. Compression release. and then you want to turn it a little bit more and make sure that that piston is up at top dead center. See, now it started to move down on it. Exhaust, intake. We're going to slide that screwdriver in there and gently. Now see that compression release, that piston is not all the way up when that hits. You got to keep going until that piston comes all the way up right there. And once it's all the way up, then you set that valve. And see, I got my valves already set. I hillbillied it together on the valve lash. Well, because my feeler gauges don't go down that small. I can't find my other ones that I use for setting engines, but this is not rocket scientists. We're not trying to send a man to the moon. We're just trying to get an engine to run. And so you can get them close. I've heard of people doing almost zero clearance on these, and that's what I did, is pretty much just about zero clearance on them. I mean, just very, very slight clearance on those valves. And you know, I've heard that if you do the zero clearance, you have your valves open just a couple of thousandths more, which can allow a little bit more fuel and a little bit more exhaust to move through it. Don't know how true it is. That's just what I've heard, and I've set these things to zero clearance before, and I've eyeball clearanced them, so no big deal. Anyway, that's the end of our free upgrades. Now, let's go move on to some hillbilly upgrades, shall we? Y'all can insert some evil laughter right here if you want to. What I have here is a 2.5 inch bimetal hole saw and a 1/2 inch thick chunk of aluminum that I picked up at the scrapyard. I didn't pay very much at all. I got several of these little blocks like this, and I paid like $5 or $6 for like 8 of these little blocks. But I've got enough to get 2 cuts out of this right here. So we're going to cut us a plug out of this. You don't want to do this super fast. You want to take your time, and you want to make sure you keep the hole saw oiled, otherwise you're going to burn it up. There we have it now. A 2.5 inch, 1/2 inch thick aluminum plug. Alright, now can you guys guess what I'm going to do with this? Think about it. What do you think I'm going to do with that aluminum plug? This is a 1 inch hole saw that I'm getting ready to drill a hole in the middle of the 2.5 inch plug. And I'm using the center hole that the first original hole saw made to center up the second hole. Anybody got any guesses yet? Now that 2.5 inch hole saw, it takes a long time to do that because there's a lot more blade surface, and you're removing a lot more material on a 2.5 inch hole than you are a 1 inch hole. The 1 inch breezes right through it, but the 2 inch takes oh man, probably 8 to 10 minutes to cut through there. The 1 inch doesn't take very long at all. You just got to let the tool do the work. Don't force it. And if you notice, I got my drill press turned down pretty low speed. I don't want to heat this up and burn up my hole saw. Spray some more oil in there. Push down just a little bit too hard. You want to do this gently. Doing this every once in a while, you want to take and hit that hole saw with a wire brush just to keep the teeth cleaned out in it. It'll cut better for you that way. And it ain't no race. There ain't no way you need to get into a hurry doing this. When you get into a hurry, that's when you start breaking stuff. Anybody have any ideas what this is going to be now? Well, I'll tell you what it's going to be. It's going to be a carb adapter. I got this PZ30 carburetor, and if you see, the holes on that, the mounting holes are straight across, and on the Predators, the bolts are like that. So I'm going to drill a set of holes in that ring, make me a couple of gaskets, and I'm going to countersink a set of Allen bolts so that I can bolt that ring onto the Predator engine, and then clock this to where it'll set straight up and down. And then I could put this nice big carburetor on that little bitty Predator. And a pod filter will bolt right up to it. It's got a choke. It's got a slide throttle. These carburetors have a lot better throttle response than the stock Predators. And they let you open them up so you can hit higher RPMs than the stock Predator carburetors too. But that's what that's going to be for. Well, we got that to fit. Now we've got to countersink the two Allen bolts and then drill a hole here and there so we can clock that carburetor correctly, and then we'll have to tap those two holes and our Mikuni style carburetor adapter will be done. We're looking at this. It's an aluminum intake. I bet you we could drill a small hole in the side of this somewhere and thread that, and then put a jet in it and inject you know, those little mini nitrous kits you can get for these small engines. I bet you that we can set this up as a nitrous intake injector. So instead of the nitrous going in the air pod, you'll get a shot of nitrous right here in the intake, right by the valve. Interesting. You might actually pick up some more power doing it that way. Not sure, but that'd be cool. Here is the beginnings of the gasket that goes up against the engine, and all I did was I held my intake, now it's an intake, up against some of this gasket maker material. That's good stuff to have around, because you're not going to find gaskets for this. You have to make your own gaskets. Anyway, I just held it up there, took the scissors, cut around it, and then I took a hole punch from the back, from this side down, and just pinned through it. And now I'll take a larger punch and enlarge these two holes, and that will be all set to mount on the engine after I knock that hole in the middle there, which I'll probably just use the 1-inch hole saw and set it back in there and mark it with the 1-inch hole saw, and then I should be able to just cut it out with my scissors. Line those holes up and made a hole in it with the hole saw, and I just turned the hole saw backwards, and there is the inside edge of my gasket. Now I could take my scissors and cut it out, but I prefer taking a rotary leather punch and just slowly nipping a bunch of holes around that, and I have less of a chance of tearing that gasket when I make it. Gasket. I just nipped a bunch of holes in it with the rotary hole punch there, and popped those two holes out there with the rotary. And now I've got to make the gasket to go on this side that will clock the carburetor and attach the carburetor to the intake. This is the block side, and this will be the carburetor side. Isn't that pretty, billet? I think it's pretty. It's shiny. Now there's the billet intake installed, and that'll space that carburetor out, and that'll make that carburetor right there set level. And I've got my second gasket cut out and made. I need to trim the inside edge here just a little bit on it. But there you go. There is a homemade carburetor adapter for a Mikuni style carburetor, but this isn't a Mikuni. This is a Kaihen PZ30 that works pretty good on these 212 Predators. You just gotta get them to set level, and they work a lot better. Definitely have better throttle response than the stock ones. And said it before and I'll say it again, around here standard issue is just not good enough. That out there, isn't that a whole lot of awesome rolled up into one? We got our homemade billet intake, homemade gaskets with our bigger carburetor, and we've done the internals on this engine. Yeah, I'm tired. It's been a long day. By the way, that's going to be the filter that's going to go on it. Isn't that going to be cool? Let's go ahead and put that filter on there. Alright, there we go. We got the filter on it, and we got the cover put back on. Ain't it pretty? I'm going to spin around and look at this side. There's the choke right there. Whew. Yeah, okay, it's been a long day, and I think I'm done. It's time to go inside and take a shower. I am drenched in sweat. I don't have air conditioning down here. Wish I did, but I don't. But yeah, I'm gonna go up here and get me a shower and just kind of kick back and relax for a while. Anyway, guys, we'll see you later. Take care.